On the night of July 13, 2019, a distressed 911 call was placed in the town of Inveros, Florida, by a panicked 17-year-old teenager named Carlos. The adolescent frantically requested assistance for his mother, Denise. He informed the operator that he had awoken from a nap to find his mother injured in her own bed, her head fractured with a hatchet. At that instant, the lady was still alive but unresponsive. The young man was in a state of panic, unsure of how to aid his cherished one, and the dispatcher was doing everything in their power to soothe him and guide him out of the residence. The emergency responder was uncertain if anyone else was present in the home who could potentially cause harm to Carlos. Consequently, they sought to ensure that the teenager would remain secure while law enforcement was en route. This startling call directed law enforcement to the outskirts to a spot quite isolated from the commotion. With their firearms ready, the officers cautiously entered the residence to investigate if anyone else was present. Proceeding from one area to another, they found that the house was empty except for one bedroom where Denise Hollowell lay on the bed. It was a gruesome scene. A hatchet was embedded in the back of her head. The act was carried out with such intensity that only a few inches of the blade protruded from her head. Despite this, the paramedics still attempted to administer first aid to the woman, but sadly Denise could not be rescued. That very night, she was pronounced deceased. The authorities were perplexed as to why someone would need to forcibly enter the home to end the life of the occupant while sparing her son and not taking anything valuable. The house was situated in a remote location close to a lake. There were a few neighboring residences nearby, but they all belonged to Denise's friends. Carlos, the victim's son, provided a similar account. He had no clue who could have been responsible for this, as everyone in the vicinity was either a friend of his mother or an acquaintance from church. According to popular opinion, Denise Hollowell was an exceptional individual in every way. Her generosity and kindness inspired all who interacted with her. She was a woman with a warm heart, a bright smile, and a contagious laugh who was deeply committed to those she cherished, both friends and family. Denise had been married twice, but these relationships, it turned out, did not have a long-term future. The woman once again returned to the lakeside house that had been in her family for 3 generations. Close by was the residence of her dearest friend, Emmy. Their families had resided on adjacent lots their entire lives. The girls grew up side by side, and as adults, they maintained an excellent relationship. Denise simultaneously pursued her teaching degree while working as a veterinary technician. After obtaining her diploma, she proudly began teaching, and in addition to this profession, the woman also engaged in community activities in her neighborhood. Denise was deeply committed to the area where she lived, volunteering at local charities or independently organizing fundraisers to assist a family in need. Hollowell strived to live for others, and this gave her a sense of fulfillment in her own worldview. A small piece of the puzzle was missing to make life shine with new colors. Denise longed to become a mother. She did not have a strong relationship that would serve as the foundation for a happy family life. With each passing year, the possibility of giving birth to a child on her own became increasingly elusive. But for Denise, this did not play a significant role because her heart held enough love and tenderness for an adopted baby. Denise was also adopted by foster parents. She recalled the feeling of joy when she was selected from a group of children, so she wanted to give the same opportunity that she once had to a child left in the care of the state. Denise was unaware that she had the ability to provide these kids with the life they deserve. Primarily, Hollowell located an adoption agency where there were children from Central America, and this led her to encounter a delightful little boy from Guatemala. His name was Carlos, and he became her son from the first glance. From the first embrace, Denise adored Carlos as her own child, and they instantly became inseparable. Subsequently, the woman even got a tattoo on her ankle with the name of her firstborn. Evidently, the Hollowell family, consisting of 2 individuals, was incredibly joyful. Carlos proved to be the son every parent would wish for. The boy excelled in school, even skipping 1 grade by passing exams externally. He was excellent at sports and very well liked among other classmates. At one point, he got a girlfriend who really adored him. A serious relationship was developing between them, and Denise and the girl's parents considered them a wonderful couple and were already making plans for the future. From a charming brown-eyed boy, Carlos transformed into a very mature young man. Everyone adored him, especially his mother. They said that there was an incredibly close bond between them. Even Denise's friend Emmy was envious of her because she had constant problems with her own children. Denise adored her son immensely. She wanted to give him absolutely everything in her power. The woman herself was not particularly interested in having more children. With the arrival of Carlos, her dreams of motherhood were completely fulfilled. At some point, she thought that perhaps the boy would be happier if he had a brother or sister. They say that the path to difficulty is paved with good intentions. Denise did adopt another child, an 8-year-old boy from Honduras. At the time of adoption, his name was Angel, and he was supposed to become Carlos's younger brother. This is where everything turned out entirely different from what was originally planned. The relationship with Angel turned out differently, and the hopes for a happy family life crumbled like a house of cards. In 2015, a few years prior to her passing, Denise had to contact law enforcement and report Angel missing as she was unable to locate him anywhere. The patrol officers who arrived first prepared a protocol and wanted to examine the teenager's room, after which they had a mixed reaction towards the child's mother and the entire situation in general. Angel's room and what they observed in it left the officers somewhat perplexed. By that time, the boy was 12 years old, so they anticipated seeing posters on the walls, a plethora of toys and gadgets, as is typical for children of his age. However, instead, they encountered a completely empty room except for an inflatable mattress on a frame and a bucket intended to be used as a toilet. The window was boarded shut, and there were locks on the outside of the door to secure the room from the outside. While the police were investigating the house, Denise located Angel on her own. He was concealing himself in a neighbor's shed. The officers wanted to ask the boy a few questions to ascertain what was happening, and then a very troubling picture began to emerge. Angel informed the police that he was treated very poorly in the Hollowell house. Every night, he was locked in his bedroom and permitted to leave the room only to perform housework. And even when he went out to do housework, he was compelled to do it completely naked. He also reported that Denise and Carlos frequently hit him below the belt. It all appeared so terrible that Denise was arrested and charged with very serious accusations of mistreating her son. Both teenagers were removed from her custody. Carlos attempted to assist his mom and post bail for her to get her out of jail, but ultimately it wasn't necessary. Denise's lawyer was able to persuade the judge to release her under house arrest with an electronic ankle bracelet. The entire situation in the Hollowell family caused outrage in the community. Denise was a teacher and a mother of 2 children. The woman was accused of inappropriate treatment of her own son. At the time this occurred, she was teaching natural sciences and social sciences at a private school. Because of this whole situation, Denise could not return to work. The management placed her on administrative leave until the situation with the accusation and arrest was finally clarified. The students' parents were informed that nothing like this had been noticed about Denise before. She had an impeccable teaching career, but who knows what can happen behind closed doors at home. Despite the fact that the woman was released from prison under house arrest, she could not work and therefore could not pay the bills. For her, the situation with Angel's escape ended in disaster. She lost her children, credit card debts were mounting, her reputation as a teacher was ruined, and Denise's whole life was practically destroyed. It would seem that this is precisely what she deserved if she really treated her own children badly. All this happened primarily because of Angel's words, but as soon as the investigation commenced and the police began to delve into the details of the case, everything started to seem far-fetched and false. There was no evidence that Denise had mistreated her sons. She did not deny that she had spanked the mischievous child a couple of times for his pranks. This was the maximum extent of physical discipline. The question arose whether to consider this physical and whether it could be called a crime. The woman also explained that she had secured the window in Angel's room because the boy had a tendency to run away. He would sneak away in the middle of the night through the window, and she would have to search for him for several hours. For the same reason, she installed a lock on the door of his room. Perhaps it was a mistake, but Denise felt that she had no other options. She spoke to a psychologist about this and consulted with the local pastor, but no advice or recommendations helped. Moreover, Angel had serious behavioral and anger issues. Therefore, there was nothing in his room as the boy would destroy things regardless of their value. Denise felt helpless and responsible for her child and did everything in her power as a mother. She had to ensure that her son would not harm himself or anyone else, and she could not simply give up on him. Confirmation of Denise's words could be found in her diary, where she wrote down everything that happened with Angel. For 3 years, there were recommendations from doctors and conversations with a priest. The woman described every step she took, built an upbringing plan, and tried various approaches with this difficult child. After Denise was charged, she tried to hand these notes over to the police to explain her behavior, but they were ignored. Her eldest son, Carlos, fully corroborated his mother's words about both the secured windows and the empty room. The boy said that Angel was constantly eager for freedom, not wanting to lead a normal life. After all, the lack of control in childhood had apparently left an imprint on his behavior. Carlos said that Denise had never insulted her sons, but Angel could easily lash out with his fists and even felt intense aggression towards animals, offending the dogs kept in the house. All this information made the police wonder if Denise's arrest was a mistake, and this soon became apparent. Both boys were placed with a foster family, where Angel immediately had problems with behavior and outbursts of aggression and violence towards his foster parents. The boy fought with the father of the family and blackmailed him, threatening to complain to the police about mistreatment if the man did not indulge his desires. This was a maneuver he had previously used at the Hollowell house. It reached a point where other families began to refuse Angel. The charges against Denise were dropped, and she now had the most difficult task of restoring her shattered reputation. No matter how pure your intentions are, there will always be someone who finds negative aspects. It wasn't easy to get back on track. It took Denise a year to secure another job as a teacher. Her students were individuals with autism, and as an educator, she was successful. But before that, she had to overcome many challenges. Her boys were still not with her. Although Denise was a great mother to them, she attended all their sports events, took them on vacation, and was very attentive and involved in their lives. After all, she loved them and wanted them to have their own permanent home. In the end, she managed to get Carlos back, but regarding Angel, specialists advised her to think carefully, as it would be difficult for both of them after the events that transpired. By law, she could take him back, but social welfare authorities recommended that Denise relinquish her parental rights for the child's benefit, which she did, although it was a very painful choice for her. This was the story of the Hollowell family before the tragic events when Denise was found with a fractured skull in her own bed. Rumors and speculations immediately began to circulate in the community that the person responsible for the death could be her son Angel, who harbored a grudge against his adoptive mother. This possibility was soon refuted, as the boy was in a juvenile detention center at that time and therefore could not have been involved in Denise's death. The police made every effort to uncover what actually happened. They searched the area on the ground and even checked the lake, involving canine services and volunteer search groups. A survey of neighbors in the area revealed rather alarming information. Many believed that Denise might have become a target for some reason because recently strange things had begun to occur in their area. People began to notice an increase in the flow of cars entering and leaving the area. Then, a mysterious fire occurred at the Hollowell house, the cause of which was never established. Neighbors said that Denise's pets had disappeared several times. The inhabitants of the house were also worried about their safety and even installed a camera and hung signs near their property indicating video recording. However, all this was just speculation because from the first day, the police already had someone in their sights: Carlos, the boy from Guatemala whom Denise adopted at the age of 4. After receiving a call from him to 911, patrol officers found Carlos on the street. Carlos was visibly distressed when he was told that Denise had passed away. Since he was the only person who was at home at the time, he was taken to the station for interrogation. The young man recounted what he and his mother were doing that day. Everything was as usual. In the morning, they attended the funeral of a family friend, then returned home, buying 2 pies at a bakery on the way. At home, they had a snack of fresh baked goods and decided to take a nap. Each went to their own bedroom. Carlos watched some YouTube videos before falling asleep. Then, at some point, he woke up, answered a few messages, and fell asleep again. The boy was fast asleep when the dogs started barking outside, although they were usually kept on the other side of the house. At first, he thought that Denise had let them out, but the barking did not stop. Carlos, shaking off the remnants of drowsiness, got up and went outside. He then noticed that the front door was wide open. After calling out to the pets, the young man looked around for his mother, but she was nowhere to be seen. He decided to check the bedroom and stumbled upon a terrible sight. Denise was lying on the bed with an axe sticking out of her head. The boy heard her trying to breathe but didn't know what to do. To avoid aggravating the situation, Carlos even tried to shake his mother slightly, but she did not respond. When the police asked Carlos who he thought could have done such a thing, he said that his mother had no enemies. The only people she communicated with always treated her warmly. They themselves lived in such isolation that they could hardly bother anyone. For some reason, Carlos's story did not inspire confidence in the investigators. Most likely, it was because they already had some information that helped form a more complete picture. There were no signs of a break-in, and the theory of an intruder seemed far-fetched from the very beginning. The relationship between mother and son was not as good as Carlos described. Just a few months prior, the police had been called to the Hollowell home after Carlos attacked his mother, resulting in a concussion and a broken arm. When reminded of this incident, Carlos reported that he and Denise had reconciled and that their quarrel could not be called a fight. They just pushed each other. He then apparently realized how it looked from the outside, and his story changed abruptly. Carlos informed the authorities that his mother constantly insulted him and would hit him in the face, head, and back, everything she could reach. After that quarrel, he even moved out of her house. The young man complained of mental health problems, which was confirmed by his acquaintances and friends. He appeared anxious and tense. It was during this time that Carlos began to heavily use illegal drugs and even contemplated suicide. Denise took him to a clinic where a doctor prescribed medication for depression and diagnosed him with suspected bipolar disorder. After treatment, the young man felt much better. His mood stabilized. He and his mother mended their relationship, and he returned home. However, the resolution of the situation was due to Denise agreeing to Carlos's demands. He wanted his mother to buy him a reliable car for trips to college. After he turned 18, Denise would still have to make a financial contribution to his college education. These were not just demands on paper. The boy wanted Denise to sign an agreement and have it notarized. Such were the complicated relationships that developed in the Hollowell family. According to reports from Denise's neighbor and closest friend, Emmy, Denise was genuinely afraid of her son when he became addicted to substances. The woman even installed several cameras to monitor what was happening and asked Emmy to take care of her dogs if something happened to her. During the interrogation, Carlos behaved somewhat defiantly and was very offended when the officers told him about their suspicions. He stated that he would never harm his mother. She was the only person he truly loved. Despite all the detectives' attempts to make him confess, he did not break down and continued to claim that he was not involved in his mother's death. Since the police had no specific evidence at that time, they had to release Carlos. Being only 17 years old, he could not stay alone in the house. The investigators tried to take him to his girlfriend's house, but the girl's parents, who had always been supportive of their relationship, refused to accept him. They were concerned about the situation with Denise and did not want to create unnecessary problems for themselves. As a result, not only did his girlfriend and her parents turn away from Carlos, but some friends also began to distance themselves. Over time, there was a hint of falsehood in his stories about his mother. The only person who agreed to take the young man in was Emmy, Denise's friend. Despite her fears, she took Carlos into her home, trying to keep him occupied to help him cope with the loss of his mother. Emmy helped plan Denise's funeral and stayed with Carlos as much as possible. However, Emmy was deeply troubled by her own suspicions. She noticed that Carlos did not appear to be grieving, seeming more concerned about potential inheritance than about Denise's absence. Despite his outward demeanor, Carlos wrote in his diary about how much he missed his mother and expressed regret that he would never be able to erase the image of her from his mind. 9 weeks later, the police called Carlos for another interrogation. He insisted that after finding his mother in a terrible state, he did not leave the house. However, his mobile phone data showed otherwise. He had been near the lake. Carlos tried to dispute this, but when he was told that divers had found items at the bottom of the lake, he broke down and provided a different version of events. The detective showed Carlos a box containing the items found in the water, 3 surveillance cameras that had once been in the house and Denise's cell phone. Unfortunately, the police could not retrieve useful information from these devices due to their time in the water. But Carlos was unaware of this and panicked. Carlos had previously told investigators that there were no cameras inside the house and that the one outside was broken. During the search, The police had noticed traces where recording devices had once been and found cables for connection, indicating that Carlos had lied. The detectives decided to search the entire area around the building, including the lake. Carlos's narrative changed as he claimed he did not remember much. He and Denise returned home from a family friend's funeral, had a snack, and went to rest. He woke up to the dogs barking, found his mother with an axe in her head, and called emergency services. Carlos now admitted that he might have done it himself but somehow erased it from his memory. He panicked, tore off the cameras, grabbed his mother's phone, and threw it into the water. This was also a lie, as the phone data showed he had been active on his phone throughout the day. Caught in another lie, Carlos slightly altered his story again. He remembered sharpening an axe but had no recollection of how it ended up in his mother's head. He said it was not planned, and he was startled by the blood from Denise's nose. Realizing what he had done, Carlos called 911 in hope of saving his mother. He insisted that he did not understand how he could have attacked her. It was a lapse of mind. Now that he had confessed, he felt a burden of guilt and would never forgive himself for his actions. Carlos explained that the reason he attacked his mother with the axe was that she often insulted and humiliated him, expressing disappointment in his behavior. Some witnesses confirmed this, and there were audio recordings of Denise scolding Carlos. On the day Carlos tried to take his own life by crashing a car into a tree, Denise was more upset about the damage to her truck than her son's well-being. She reproached him for the damage, saying that it was only thanks to her that he lived in the United States. It's difficult to learn that the victim was not the ideal mother we might have hoped for, but this does not justify the horrific crime committed by her adopted son. From the outside, their relationship appeared very close and trusting, leading many to envy their bond. However, the true nature of their relationship began to emerge only after Denise's death. In the early years, everything seemed to be going well. However, as Carlos grew older, he began to engage in risky behaviors, including alcohol, drugs, and even dealing substances. This behavior led to increased visits from suspicious individuals to their remote area. His academic performance deteriorated, resulting in his expulsion from school, a fact he hid from Denise for several months. When Denise discovered the extent of Carlos's problems, she attempted to correct his path with harsh words and actions. In his anger, Carlos retreated to the forest and chopped trees, imagining them as representations of his mother's criticisms. This outlet did not prevent the tension between them. On July 13, 2019, after attending a funeral, Carlos and Denise had a major argument. Denise criticized his choices and rejected his desire to attend technical college instead of a four-year university. She also refused to financially support his education, calling him a disappointment. In a fit of anger and tears, Carlos attacked his mother with an axe, ending her life. Carlos's reaction to his arrest was shockingly detached. He focused more on his future criminal record and its potential impact on his life than on the gravity of his crime. Despite his age, Carlos was tried as an adult. His defense argued that his actions were impulsive and driven by mental health issues and harsh parenting, while the prosecution painted him as a selfish young man who chose the wrong path. The jury found Carlos guilty, and he faced a sentence of 40 years to life imprisonment. The judge considered various factors, including Carlos's mental state and the nature of the crime. He concluded that Carlos's actions were driven by motives beyond mere emotional upheaval, including financial gain and a lack of genuine remorse. Carlos was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. He later expressed a degree of acceptance of his fate and gave an interview recounting his perspective. Carlos described how his relationship with Denise had deteriorated, particularly after Angel came into their lives. He felt that Denise's expectations and disappointments, combined with his own issues, led to the tragic events. In his reflections, Carlos acknowledged that his actions were unjustifiable and that Denise did not deserve what happened to her. This concludes the tragic story of the Hollowell family.